So who has been every Championship club's most improved player from this season? Let's talk about it. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. I want to get your guys' input onto this one in the comments down below. From your club, who do you think has been the most improved player from this season? As always, if we could hit 300 likes on today's video, that would be massively appreciated. But without any further ado, let's jump into this one. Barnsley, Mads Andersen. I think that defensively as a whole, Barnsley have improved quite a bit this season, and that's seen by the amount of goals they've conceded. They've conceded 19 fewer goals this season than they had done last season. I think that last year was the best way to sort of describe Barnsley, especially in that first half of the season, was probably naive at the back. This time they've got a little bit more streetwise. The quality in that backline has also improved, but one player whose individual performances have certainly risen up with the rest of the squad has been Mads Andersen. Been really impressed with him so far. For Birmingham, I'm going for Mark Roberts. I think that last season he had quite a few tough moments for Birmingham. Him alongside Harley Dean, I think, have each improved this season. You know, it's easy to forget that last season Birmingham defensively were absolutely woeful. They conceded 75 goals last season. Both Harley Dean and Mark Roberts are in the top 6 Championship defenders this season to have won the most defensive aerial battles. And I think he deserves a bit of credit after struggling initially after he made the move. Blackburn Rovers, Ben Brereton. He obviously came a couple of years ago from Forest with quite lofty expectations after the money that Blackburn had paid for him, and the early signs weren't all too promising. He only scored 2 goals in his first 2 seasons with the club. However, I think that having more game time this season has really helped him, and you can see by the number of goals that he's been involved with this season that there's been an obvious improvement from his performances. 7 goals, 4 assists. He only got the 1 goal for Blackburn last season. He sort of made that position on the left-hand side into his own recently, and yeah, more to come from Brereton as well, I think. For Bournemouth, I'm going to go for Philip Billing, especially since he's been pushed into that number 10 position by Jonathan Woodgate. He's played 12 times in that role and got 5 goals and 3 assists from playing in that number 10 position. Now, the obvious choice for Bournemouth this season probably would be Dom Solanke with the amount of goals he scored, but Philip Billing, I think, deserves a lot of credit because I think he's had to adapt his game quite significantly, and actually to the team's benefit. Brentford, Sergi Canos. Canos has always been a player who I think would be defined by inconsistency. You know, on his day in the past, he's always been a bit of a live wire for Brentford, but you can never really bank on him putting in like consistently decent performances for Brentford. But this season, especially with the new role that he's been playing lately as that left wing back in the absence of Rico Henry, I think Canos deserves a lot of credit. It's been his best season to date in terms of goal contributions with 9 goals and 8 assists, but what's really impressed me is some of the defensive contributions that he comes back with. I know that Brentford lost that first leg against Bournemouth, but he went flying into one tackle early on in that game, and so yeah, Sergi Canos does deserve a bit of credit for the improvement that we've seen from him this season. For Bristol City, I've gone with Tariq Bakinson. I was struggling to find a player for Bristol City really, but I think that with Bakinson's story, you know, the last couple of years he's been out on loan in League 2, to come back into the first team for this season, get 20 starts, 14 appearances off the bench, score 4 goals for the team as well, and he sort of developed himself into that first teamer now. Cardiff City, I'm going to go for Will Volks. I don't think that he had the greatest of first seasons with Cardiff, and after he came with quite a few expectations. You know, he was brilliant the previous year with Rotherham. Last season he made that move over to Cardiff. He only made 19 starts for them last season. This time around he's been a much more consistent member of that first team, making 36 starts for Cardiff this year, and overall I think his performances have gone up a notch. Coventry, I'm going to go for their goalkeeper Ben Wilson. I think that the fact that he didn't come into this season as their number 1 goalkeeper, obviously after Morosi got that injury, he stepped into that number 1 spot. I think he's done a fantastic job since. You know, Coventry haven't looked back since he got that nod. He's been the 8th best Championship goalkeeper this season in terms of save percentage, and he's pulled off some absolute worldy of saves along the way. So yeah, fair play to Ben Wilson. Been a good season for him. Derby County, I've gone for Lee Buchanan. I think it's been a difficult environment for anyone to particularly thrive and shine at Derby this season, but regardless, Buchanan I think's done well. They obviously sold low in the last summer transfer window, so someone was going to have to step up and fill that void that was left at left back. I think that Buchanan's done a really good job for that this season. He only had the 3 starts for Derby last year. This time round got much more first team experience, making 28 starts for Derby. I think that at 20 he's done fairly well for Derby this year. Huddersfield Town, Isaac Mbenza. This transfer initially really didn't work out and he struggled to find his feet at Huddersfield, but this season there has been an obvious upturn in his performances. 5 goals, 7 assists, and because of this sort of improvement in performances, what may end up happening this summer is Huddersfield actually get the chance to sell him on for a little bit of money now. In terms of a free kick, physical, being useful on that wing. And Ben's been alright this season, hasn't he? Certainly an improvement on previous years. Luton Town, it's got to be Simon Sluga, hasn't it? Had a really tough first debut year in English football with Luton after arriving as a club record fee. It was the errors leading to goals which were ultimately his downfall last season. You know, he spent a little bit of time out of the squad as well, but towards the end of that season we started to see a bit of an upturn in performances, and I think that this season we've seen much more consistency from the goalkeeper. For Middlesbrough, of course, it's got to be Mark Bowler, who's looked so much more mature and assured at the back this season for Middlesbrough. I think he struggled with his debut year in the Championship. He obviously was loaned back out to Blackpool after initially sort of struggling to make an impact, but whether he's played as a fullback or a little bit further up as a wing-back, Mark Ball this season has been very impressive for Borough. For Millwall, I've got to go for Scott Malone. I think that his time at Derby seemed to tail off, and towards the end he was struggling for minutes and form there, but this season at Millwall, Gary Rowett's really got the best out of him in terms of attacking returns and being a solid defender. You know, he's been part of that defensive unit which has ultimately kept 17 clean sheets this season, but in terms of his attacking returns, he's scored some absolute worldies this season. 5 goals to his name, a few of them being absolute crackers. Scored a brilliant one against North End, and yeah, I think he'll be a good option for Millwall if they do look to get him on a permanent. Norwich City, I've gone for Kenny McLean. Norwich was a tough one to choose because I think we all knew coming into this season how good all these Norwich players actually were, so to choose one who we think's improved over the season, but Kenny McLean probably goes a little bit under the radar. You know, Ollie Skipp's obviously got the majority of the plaudits this season for that Norwich midfield, and rightly so, he's been absolutely wonderful, but in terms of that partner alongside him this season, who has had some real moments of quality throughout the season, you know, 2 goals, 6 assists to his name, but I think he does do well to add quite a bit of balance to that midfield, and like I say, yeah, maybe at times just goes a little bit under the radar. For Nottingham Forest, I'd probably go with Cyrus Christie, to be honest with you. I think that whoever stepped into that right back role for Forest this season obviously had a bit of an impossible act to follow, you know, with how good Matty Cash had been the previous year, you know, with him being possibly one of the best fullbacks we've seen in the Championship over the last decade or so. But Cyrus Christie, I think he's done an alright job for Forest this season. He started 44 matches, he's been one of their more consistent performers, and at a time in his career where he seemed to be heading backwards, I think he needed a solid season like this. Fresh North End, I think it has to be Ryan Ledson. I'd also give him our Player of the Year as well, but in terms of someone whose minutes have increased and responsibility within the team has certainly increased this season, Ryan Ledson has ticked a lot of boxes for North End. I think that the area of his game where he's most improved is his on-the-ball ability, because when Preston first signed Ryan Ledson, you know, he seemed to be this very sort of tenacious, quite aggressive midfielder who'd fly into tackles and things like that, but on the ball, there was clearly still a lot of work to do with him, but in that area this season, he's probably been like our best midfielder in terms of looking to break the lines. In terms of key passes this season, he's made more, considerably more even, than any other player this season for North End. 53 key passes he's got this season. The next player that's closest to him within the squad is Tom Barkhuizen with 28. QPR, I'd go for Johan Barbet. You know, I think that Ilias Chair obviously deserves a shout for the most improved at QPR this season, but Barbet's always been a player who, I mean, even from his Brentford days, I think that everyone recognises is a good footballer. It was always just about those lapses in concentration, those silly mistakes at the back, you know, giving away a penalty every now and again or something like that. What I think Barbet's really been helped by this season is the introductions into that back line of a Rob Dickie and a Jordy Device this season, you know, to come in alongside him and have sort of allowed him to play his own game at the back. Also really impressive the minutes that he's played for QPR this season. I think the only outfield player this season in the Championship to play every single minute of every single match. So availability is obviously a massive thing. You know, he missed a fair bit of last season through injury at one point, I think, didn't he? So yeah, Johan Barbet this season, really impressive stuff. For Reading, I'm going to go for Tom McIntyre. He had some tough games at the start of the season. There was one especially, it was Preston actually, who were away at Reading, and he was at fault for a couple of the goals in that one. And when you have a bit of a clanger as a defender, and especially a young defender like he is, you know, only 22 years old, sometimes that can bury you, and you find it tough to sort of grip your way back into that first team and put that behind you. But I think he's done really well to establish himself more and more as the season's gone on. He's been an ever more reliable member of that Reading back line and deserves a lot of credit for the gradual improvement that I think Reading fans have seen in his performances as the year's gone on. For Rotherham, do you know what? I kind of wanted to give this one to Lewis Wing, because I feel like before he made the move to Rotherham in January on loan from Middlesbrough, his career at Middlesbrough was sort of just drifting. You know, he wasn't all too involved up to that point in the season with Borough. There was always the feeling about Lewis Wing that he was a good player on his day, but his day was becoming sort of less and less. He was just quite an inconsistent player, wasn't he? But at Rotherham, I mean, I think that Lewis Wing did absolutely everything in his power to try and keep them up. You know, he came up with some wonderful performances, scored that brilliant goal on the last day of the season, but his overall game, not just when we're talking about goals and assists, he added some real quality into that Rotherham midfield, and now going back to Middlesbrough has certainly given them something to think about in terms of his long-term future at the club. For Sheffield Wednesday, I mean, I'm scraping the barrel a little bit here trying to find anyone. I've gone for Josh Windass because he's had his best return in terms of goals and assists in English football this season with Wednesday, with 9 goals and 5 assists, and towards the end of his time at Wigan especially, he wasn't particularly held in very high regard by the fans there, but he has proven himself to be useful at times for Wednesday, albeit has been quite inconsistent. He ultimately, you know, has come up with more goal contributions this season than any other player in that squad. For Stoke City, I am going to go with the obvious choice, and that is Nick Powell, but I think that we've seen a level of performance and a consistent level of performance, especially in the second half of the season, where he has been able to take his game to a new level. Now, I think that a lot of people always thought that he was capable of this. He certainly showed it from his time at Wigan, but it was always a question of him consistently keeping himself fit. You know, that's always been the thing that sort of held him back from stepping on to that next level, has been his injury record. Well, this season, 38 starts for Stoke. In the second half of the season especially, he has been their talisman going forward, and without him, God knows how they would have fared in the second half of the season. Swansea City, I'd have to go for Jake Bidwell. I think that especially in the first half of the season and his contributions to this Swansea side then, when they were consistently going with that 5 at the back system and the 2 wing backs, which just seemed to suit him down to the ground, I think we saw a level of performance that we've not seen from Jake Bidwell in the Championship for quite some time actually. You know, 8 assists this season. I remember it was the first game of the season actually when Swansea came to Deepdale, and he was the outlet on that left hand side who was delivering some quality balls one after another into the box, and yeah, in terms of individual performances, I think that Bidwell's improved his game a lot this season. For Watford, I'd have to go for Nathaniel Chalobah. I think that his performances really improved as the season went on, up until this point at the end of the season now, where he was a bit of a mainstay in that Watford side. Scored some wonderful goals as the year went on as well. He's got really quick feet in and around the box, hasn't he? But up until this season at Watford, he'd been in and out of that team and his chances seemed to be running out. But in the second half of the season especially, Watford fans finally got to see what Chalobah was capable of. I think it was a really positive end to the season for him especially. And then finally for Wycombe, do you know what? I go for David Stockdale. I really thought that he as a goalkeeper was finished at this level after how his time at Birmingham had ended, you know. I had it in my mind that naturally after that he'd just be a player who had fallen off so much that he continued to sort of tumble down the leagues. But once he got his chance with Wycombe this season, he sort of came in partway through the season, didn't he? I thought he really took it. He's in the top half of Championship goalkeepers this season in terms of save percentage, and he did pretty much all he could to try and get Wycombe over the line this season. But guys, there we have it. There was every Championship club and who for me has been their most improved player from this season. Do you agree with my selections? Get your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, 300 likes would be massively appreciated on today's video. Make sure to stick around and subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. But apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.